We need one more. You hear him no dressing. Jimmy here. James. Yeah, here's the best one. He needs salad dressing. Everybody grab a seat. Thank you, buddy.
Father, we thank you for this time that we can come together and you could bring this about, Lord, that we could come here and remember our great friend Eddie Gilbert. And Father, we thank you that you have allowed some of these busy men in here, the wrestling great past, Father, to come together and just make all this turn out. And we thank you, Father. We ask you to bless the food for the nourishment of our bodies. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Thank you very much. Thank you, buddy. All right, I just want to say, God bless America. This is the greatest country in the world. Pro wrestling is the greatest sport in the world. As Donnie Livell has on his stationery, it's the sport for kings. And I just want to say, there's not a sport out there where you can start talking about wrestling and talking about stories and talking about the greats of wrestling and start out on a Friday afternoon and then 2 o'clock in the morning, Monday night at Nitro, wherever you're going. It's just a great sport to talk about. You can sit around for hours and talk about stories about Bill Watts and Jim Cornette and Doug Gilbert and Eddie Gilbert and Buddy Landel and Bill Apter, Dan Severn, and you just keep talking and talking about it. We've already proved that. We got here yesterday afternoon. That's all we've been doing is telling stories, playing jokes. Is a great way for people to come together. Wrestling fans are the best. Now, I want to remind everybody, this started out last year as a tribute for my good friend Eddie Gilbert. Eddie was one of my best friends. I loved Eddie. I wanted to keep his name alive in the business. And what we decided to do this year was to still keep it going, but remember certain other individuals that are in this business that I don't want to be forgotten. And we're going to try to add different ones every year. This year, beside Eddie, we're honoring the great independent starlighters. Remember Chief Thunder Mountain, who died at a young age. We're also here honoring Dick Murdoch. Dick Murdoch, along with Eddie Gilbert, has touched everybody in this room one way or another. Everybody knows Dick, how friendly he was. You know, just like Eddie, he always had time for the fans. He was a great guy to be around. And we're also honoring probably one of the greatest NWA champions of all time. It's an honor for me to have him here. It's the great Harley Race. Also, we're here. We have a surprise. We have two surprise honorees tonight. We have a surprise for. We'll be giving the Cowboy Bill Watts, another great person in the business, a great promoter, a great booker, an even greater wrestler, one of the greatest wrestling stars ever, and he has left an impact on his business with some of the talent he has produced, some of the promotions he has run. And everybody out there I know stole his ideas that are doing TV now and running promotions. So you got to give him credit. Anyway, if you look in the first page of your program, somebody tore it out. I have a list of people that have really helped me out with this situation today. On the first page, there's a couple people I forgot. I have a good friend out there named Ace Robinson helped me out with this. Frank Starr, wherever he's at, he was a big help. And it was just a lot of people that really helped me with this and put this thing together, and they deserve a lot of credit. Let's give them all a big hand. Again, our guest MCs, Donnie Livell, wonderful Willie Apter, senior editor of Pro Wrestling Illustrated. Every year he gets promoted, so I got to check with him. But anyway, I want to say one last thing here. Tomorrow night, in Philadelphia, they're having a pay-per-view. Yes. A few months ago, the owner of the company got up at his building and thanked everybody in the world for this pay-per-view. But I want to say this now, and this is the only damper on the day. This person forgot to thank one person, and that's the person that made that company, and it's the reason they're having that pay-per-view. And this was the guy that he put his arm around him, took him to his home, broke bread with his family, taught him everything he knows Eddie Gilbert taught him. Then he turned around and he took a knife and he stuck it in Eddie Gilbert's back and cut his heart out. Eddie Gilbert deserves all the credit for that pay-per-view tomorrow night, and don't forget it. And when you're sitting there tomorrow night, remember, he's the man that made it happen. Am I right, Bob McGee? You know that. You wrote some articles about it. But anyway, this time I'd like to turn it over to wonderful Willie Apter.
Okay, thank you everybody, and welcome. Eddie Gilbert was a very good friend of mine, and there was one thing that Eddie Gilbert and Dick Murdoch shared in common, and that was a sense of humor. There's an opening bell that starts the matches. When you go to wrestling, the bell rings, the match starts. The opening bell for Eddie Gilbert and I was always this great stupid joke. Every time he saw me, I did this last year, he always said, "Tell me that joke." So, in honor of Eddie Gilbert, once again, I tell this horrible joke. Eddie and I were in Hawaii, and we were arguing. Oh, he's already got the punchline. Yeah. We were standing there arguing, is it pronounced Hawaii or Hawaii? So I said, it's Hawaii. He said, it's Hawaii. I said, Hawaii, Hawaii. So wait a minute, why don't we stop like one of the island people and ask them if it's Hawaii, Hawaii? So guys walking down the street, we stopped and we said, excuse me, sir, could you tell us, is it Hawaii or Hawaii? And the guy started, well, you know, brother, in the wonderland of the... What's Jimmy Snook, obviously. And he went on for like 3 hours. So we stopped somebody else. We said, sir, is it pronounced Hawaii or Hawaii? And the old man said, son, it's pronounced Hawaii. And I said, thank you very much. And he said, you're welcome. So, anyway, Eddie and I, you can hiss, but Eddie loved that joke, didn't he, Tommy? We always did that joke. Anyway, last year, at the end of the banquet, we had shown a videotape that I produced out of a labor of love for Eddie Gilbert. I spent 3 or 4 nights in an editing suite putting this thing together myself, and we figured what better way to start things off this time but with the tribute to the man that we're all here to pay our love and respect to, Eddie Gilbert. So I'd like you to all watch this tape and please enjoy it. Remember that great guy Eddie Gilbert with a great sense of humor, great wrestler, and he loved all the fans. Here's the tape. As I mentioned, that occasions together, and yes, he did do a better Terry Funk than I do. I never told him that, but he definitely did. One of the people we're honoring tonight, who's also here to honor Eddie Gilbert, is one of wrestling's all-time greats. Before we tell you who this man is, let's watch this.
Thank you, and I sure want to thank Dennis for calling me, and I didn't know him when he called, and of course then he gave me the worst reference in the world. He said, call Jim Cornette and check me out. Just sitting down here with Tommy, and I want to say thank you to all of you. It's amazing to me to come back here, and a lot of you weren't born or never got to see our shows, and they've become a cult situation that everybody compares the industry by, and that's really, really wonderful. And I'm just so happy to have been a part of that. And there's a lot of emotion when you see Eddie and Tommy and Harley. You know, I was fortunate enough to work against what I thought was the greatest team in the world with the Von Brauners, and then went to the West Coast and worked with Pat Patterson and Ray Stevens, and Ray Stevens was in his prime, and Pat was becoming that person under his tutelage. And then I went to Minnesota, and there was a team that was the most awesome team I ever saw, Harley Race and Pretty Boy Larry Hennig. I got to be around so many fabulous people, and when you're saying people are stealing what I had, I stole from everybody too. You learned, you went and studied. That was the one thing that we had in the business in those days that's gone forever. You had the great places to go study. You studied under Roy Shires, under Vern Gagne. We'd cuss them, but we'd study. We'd learn from them. Under Eddie Graham, Eddie Graham to me was the ultimate genius in wrestling. Eddie Graham was such a wonderful human being when you knew him. And so you got to do a lot of things, and then I got fortunate enough to get in a position to be in the promotion and get to touch a lot of people's lives. And oftentimes they didn't know what you saw in them, and oftentimes you didn't know the impact you were having on them till later. And a lot of those stars, unfortunately for Eddie, that light went out before he really got to achieve everything he wanted to achieve. But I got to see that talent in there, and it was amazing how you could challenge that talent And the fact that you believed in him made him respond in the right way. And so I'm only sad that we didn't get to go on. When I was at WCW, I was getting ready to bring Eddie in when I just finally couldn't stand WCW any longer. And I had to go home because Eddie was a brilliant young man. And reminds me of Bill Dundee. He was so much fun. And as a matter of fact, how I got Jimmy Cornette, I went one time because my area was just dead flat. I went to Memphis to watch a show, and there was a young Jimmy Cornette on the card, Dennis Condrey, Bobby Eaton, Eddie Gilbert. I can't think of anybody else. So, you know, as I see this rascal, he's already telling Dennis why he's late. I said, I've heard all those stories. I mean, my golly, here he is coming in. I hadn't seen him in years. He's already late again and telling a cock and bull story to the promoter. And then he's trying to tell me I fined him. I don't believe that. I don't think he was the guy that's fined the most in Mid-South. Hold the record. A talented kid. And you know, the wrestlers don't fit a mold. There's something kind of a screw loose up there anyway to be one. You've got to have where you have that thing that you just don't fit life, and there's something in you that when you get to go out there and create. And that creativity is what draws you to it. And oftentimes the very guy that's the greatest creator also has the most self-destructive tendencies. And there's that constant battle. And we see it today. And I was no different. I had some tremendously self-destructive tendencies too, and was blessed with a lot of creativity and blessed with seeing a lot of guys that you could just reach out and kind of pull something out of them, and it was really a kick. I know even Paul Orndorff called me back after he left and he said, I didn't realize until I was gone what all you taught me. And you still hear from the Ted DiBiase's and the people like that, and it's really a tremendous thing. So this is a wonderful time to get together and get to reminisce, and like I say, Eddie was such a talented kid that it was exciting to see, and Jim Ross and Dundee and them would come to me, and of course working with his dad, we had a lot of fun with a lot of things. And then Jimmy Cornette was again, Jerry Jarrett at that time, his area was doing real well, and he wanted to keep Hart, and he wanted to keep the two blondes, Stan Lane and Steve Kern, and gave me the Rock and Roll Express. What a deal. And gave me this young Jim Cornette who, when I saw him, I just wanted to go out and slap him myself. And you knew when he had that something, that if I wanted to slap him and I was in the business, I knew the fans would hate him. And so it was the greatest thing to get him and Dennis and Bobby Eaton, who is just the consummate performer, and to have that team. And my area, I had the tough guys. God, gosh, I had Dr. Death. I had Hacksaw Duggan, you know, all these Captain Redneck. I mean, I love the tough guys, and I only had two rules. If you got in a fight in my dressing room, we didn't break it up. I wanted you to see who could whip whose ass, and then I was going to book you back against each other, see if you want to do it again. The second thing, if you got a fight in public, if you lost, you got fired. Ask Bobby Orton Jr. I looked at his knuckles, and there wasn't any bruises on him. I didn't think he'd thrown enough punches, and fired him. So that's just a couple of things we had. So it was really neat to see all these people. But I had all these tough guys, and my crowds were going down, down, down. And Lawler and Jarrett, I had them come over just to my TV taping and look at it. Sometimes you're in the trees so deep you can't see the forest. And I won't repeat the remark they said after the taping, but it woke me up to the fact that I was missing a major demographic. I had no youth in my crowd. I had that. I was down to my base, my hardcore base, the people that come to wrestling no matter what. And so I went over and visited them, and I worked the trade out with them. They got the kid Rick Rude. Yeah. You know, he's the guy that wasn't on roids. He'd weigh 180 pounds probably. But they got Rude and a couple others, and I got Jimmy Cornette, who they wanted to get rid of. And I got the Rock and Roll, Condrey and them, and I got Dundee out of the deal eventually. Got Tommy, Eddie. What a year I had. I'm still living off of it. You know, I mean, I'd throw all the money up in the air each time in the evening, and whatever stuck to the ceiling, I'd pay the guys, and I'd keep the rest. I mean, you know, there's no mystery. But no, it's really nice to be back and to see Bill Apter and see George and so many of you, and again, to be appreciated for what other people did for me by all of you. That's really, really special. So I hope everybody enjoys the weekend. I think most of the anecdotes that I'd like to repeat, I just am kind of careful about what I'd say in public. Harley and I have been, good gosh, we've been up and down that highway so many times and pulled so many things that it's just mind-boggling. I had to carry him, I had to teach him most of what he knows the hard way, and we can't even go into all of that. No. It's just a wonderful thing, and it really lets me reminisce. And I'll say another thing, and Dickie Murdoch, thank God he came to see me a few months before he died, because Dickie Murdoch was certainly special in my life. And when I came back to Oklahoma after being with Eddie for a year down there, Dickie came with me, and he was the first star that I put everything into to build beyond myself. When you were promoting your own area back in those days, you had to have one person you knew was going to show up and not try to hold you up. So generally, if you had any ability, you had a lot built around yourself. But I knew that that had to end at some point. Dickie Murdoch was the first guy I built, and he busted his ass and went up and down that highway. And it was just so great that I did get to see him before he passed away. And Cox called me about it and everything else. And he was really, really special. But there were so many special guys. And the thing is, I think we took for granted a lot of what was happening as we were going through it. And as you get older, you can look back on it and just see how precious it really was. And there's an era that's dead, and unfortunately the fans are the ones getting screwed, because the two big outfits are stagnant. I mean, the same stars that were stars when I sold out are still the stars, and there's nowhere for the young guys to come up and learn, and there's no way to compete with the money that they've got, and they've got a lot of stagnation at the top, and they don't know that, because they're doing the best they can do. They're not doing it on purpose, but that's the sad thing. Whereas when I was in the business, you had so many different offices you could go work for, and under each different guy had different strengths as a promoter, that you had so many things you'd learn. And you'd learn the things you appreciated, and you'd learn the things that you didn't like. And so we've lost that giant school that's out there that brings out the talent, and then the cream rose to the top. And that was what was the beautiful thing about the business. So unless there's some way to break through what's happening in that, it'll just never be recovered probably. And I'm not saying, you know, the old thing, everybody always wants to go back in the past. That's not it. I think the athletes are bigger, they're stronger, they're faster. They've got everything going for them. There's certainly a greater media to expose them, but that's also a thing that is an Achilles heel for them. Anyway, I just want to say thank you, and I'm so happy to get to see Tommy and meet the rest of the family and everybody here. And I got to meet Dan Severn, who I was just with Jerry Jones and Barry Switzer and the Cowboys at their new restaurant, which Stan Abel, who tried to recruit Dan into college, he and Gable tried to get Dan to go to Oklahoma and to Iowa respectively, but his coach had already recruited his brothers. He saw Dan when Dan was the youngest stud down there, and he recruited two brothers? One. He recruited them to make sure he got the young stallion. So it's my pleasure then to get to see somebody that I've admired for a long time. So thank you for having me, and thank everybody here.
As a fan growing up, one of the best feuds I remember, and Georgie Ann could probably attest to this, was when Cowboy Bill Watts was feuding with Bruno Sammartino. And when I went to the matches back then, Bill Watts scared the hell out of me. I mean, I was afraid to go near Bill Watts. And when I got into the business, people said, he's going to scare the hell out of you. And I want to say in front of everybody, he did the first couple of times. But Bill Watts, anytime I needed to do a photo set with someone, if I needed an interview with one of his wrestlers, no matter what I needed, he always, very professionally, said, come down, we'll take care of it, and it always got done. So I want to thank you publicly for that, too. I have a lot of good memories of you. Okay, right now we'd like to bring up a personal friend of mine, and he's a friend of wrestling in general. He's a wrestling historian. He's a photographer. He's a reporter. He does it all. Ladies and gentlemen, my good friend Don Leibel.
tell you, looking around at the crowd here, those that were here last year, I think realize how much emotion there was, and I think with a year gone by, we're able to look at this tape, and first thing that came to mind, I thought of the Jerry Lewis telethon. You know, at the end when Jerry tries to sing his song without choking up, and I think after you watch that tape, like Mr. Watts was saying, there's a lot of emotion here, and anybody, you know, that feels emotional, this is the time to feel it. Just wanted to say a few things. With a turnout like this, knowing Eddie, he'd be very proud that there's a lot of wrestling fans here, and he'd probably be saying, you know, for people to sit down and just start talking wrestling and instead of being formal. But looking around, I know he'd be proud that Mr. Watts is here. He's if anybody, they like to use that term nowadays, icon. If anybody was a wrestling icon, certainly Mr. Watts is. He's a person that's always commanded a lot of respect, and he truly is a legend, and having someone like here today makes this so much more richer for Eddie. Also, Harley Race, I think in some indirect way, getting to sit next to him today was some type of gift from Eddie, because he knows how much that would mean to me. But if anybody was ever a pro wrestling champion that represents what most of us know as pro wrestling, Harley Race is that champion, and longevity speaks volumes. And this is a person that almost lost his leg when he was a teenager, and became one of the best ever in the business. To the Gilbert family, you know, many people say wrestling needs history. There's not enough real history anywhere, but it's events like this and the Cauliflower Alley Club that where real wrestling history begins, where people are remembered for what they really did. It's important to remember Eddie for his dedication, his perseverance, his sacrifices, and his accomplishments. And if he has a legacy, it's for everybody that he's influenced and that may try to rub off just like Eddie. With all the great people in the audience, Flash Funk, Mr. Buddy Landel, there's so many great people here. We don't want to miss anybody, but I know all this makes it that much better in honoring Eddie. And of course, we can't forget Mr. Cornette. I've known Jimmy many years, and it seems wherever there's a fans gathering, it's synonymous with Jimmy, because he's always there, staying up late with everybody and being one of the guys. And I think he's living out the wrestling fantasy that most of us wish we could. And it's always great to have him here. And it's nice to meet Eddie's sister for the first time. Kim is here. I've never met her before. And
Attention, Royce. Attention, Royce. You have an emergency message in the lobby. An emergency message in the lobby.
Just want to say again, it's nice having the Gilberts here. We've never seen Kim up in these parts, and their Eddie will always be our Eddie. And it's events like this that Dennis, his family, Tommy have really put a lot of work into. For them, it's work. We have the fun, and I think we always need to remember that. And finally, we're talking about Dick Murdoch, Chief Thunder Mountain. Wrestling also lost Bob Brown this year, Dr. Bill Miller recently, and as I said last year, and I always will, I'd just like everybody to remember my good friend John Studd, who's no longer with us, who was a good man just like Eddie. Thank you. Now, Jimmy Cornette.
Okay. I can't tell whether this thing's working or not where I'm sitting down here. This is, first of all, I want to say Dennis Coralluzzo, I think, is one of the world's most entertaining human beings. And I love him. He cracks me up. He's a good friend of mine, and I thank him again for having me up here. And when I'm standing here at this podium with all of these people, I'm not going to get, you know, maudlin and sentimental again, going over all the names and what they mean to me, but starting with Dan Severn, who I taught him everything he knows. And Bill Apter, who actually I think I've made a couple of my first dollars in this business legitimately from, taking pictures. And Harley Race, who I think is one of the greatest talents in the history of this business, who I was a big fan of, and who I later got the chance and was lucky enough to work on shows with. Tommy Gilbert, who when I had been managing about 4 or 5 months, I got a chance to work with him, and he actually took the time to teach me some stuff. And Bill Watts, who, if he hadn't wanted to slap me, I probably never would have made a nickel in this business, and I probably learned more from this guy than anybody else that I've ever worked with, and I don't care what anybody says or what anybody's opinion is, he's over with me. And then you come over to Buddy Landel, who was at one time one of wrestling's biggest louses, and is now one of my best friends and a sweetheart, and proves that you can turn around some things when they're going wrong, and Buddy was a tremendous help to me, and I'm always glad to see him, and I love him. And I think something that Bill said kind of can be expanded on in that he said, you know, we didn't really know what we were doing until we did it, and then it was gone. And I think that applies to not only to the wrestling business the way a lot of us knew it. It's changed, and it's unfortunate that you can't have what is going on today and have what we had at the same time. I guess, you know, it had to move over and make way for new stuff, but we can still remember, you know, how much fun we had. But also when it comes to Eddie and to Dick Murdoch, you just thought they were always going to be there. And Dennis asked me to say something about Dick Murdoch today as well as Eddie, because he knows that I was a big fan of Dick's and also a friend of his, and I know that I'm sure Harley has some stories about Dick as far as working with him, because they had some great matches, as you would expect from two of the best talents in the business. And I'm sure Bill has some lovely stories about Dick as far as a promoter is concerned. But Dick Murdoch was the kind of guy who knew everybody, and I don't know whether anybody in this room got the chance to meet him or spend any time around him much, but Dick was funny, he was entertaining, he had his cranky points too, but the guy knew every human being in the world, whether he'd ever met him or not. I was at NAPTE, the television programmers convention in Miami, about 1989 or 1990. They sent me and Dick down there and a couple other guys with Crockett's booth, and Dick said it was kind of slow, so Dick said, well, let's go walk around, let's see what's going on. So we passed by, and all of a sudden we see a crowd, and at one of these booths, Joe Namath had a syndicated show out at that point, some type of sports show. Dick said, let's go say hello to Joe Namath. I said, do you know him? He said, no, but I know Wahoo. So he walks up, and Namath is talking to a bunch of reporters and different television people, and Dick busts right through there. Joe, Dick Murdoch, how you doing? It's Jim Cornette. I know Wahoo McDaniel. He said, tell you hello. He told me about the time, and Murdoch proceeded to tell the story about the time Wahoo and Namath played on the Jets together, and Wahoo went out with the team at a bar and met this girl, lovely girl, and decided to go home with her. Went home with her, got up the flight of stairs in the apartment, and as things got more pronounced, found out the girl was a guy. Whereupon the person that he had dated came down the same stairs that they had just gone up, only this time it was head over heels. And all of a sudden I'm standing there watching it. Joe Namath has blown off all the reporters, he's blown off the TV people, and he and Murdoch are sitting there having a great old conversation. And Dick could do that with anybody. He would drive you nuts. He made a town for us in Tennessee one night, and he was flying out the next day, and so were we to come up with the WWF. So he goes to the hotel with us, we give him a ride, and I think he's going to get a room, right? He said, well, we only got 4 hours till the flight, I'll just hang out. Well, he was going to hang out in my room, and I run him off, and he went over to Tom Pritchard's, and Tom finally had to get some sleep and run him off, and he came back to my room, and finally I figured out how Dick had managed to save all his money. I bought him a hotel room just so he would go to bed and leave me alone so I could sleep. But I could sit here and tell stories all day, but I just want to say that Dick Murdoch was one of the great talents that I've ever seen in this business, and that I've ever worked with, and that I've ever watched. He was better than most people when he wasn't even trying, and he wouldn't try most of the time because he could have fun and get by with it. But when he did try, he was spectacular. But he could be upside down in the middle of a hip toss and look over in the corner and tell you a joke and never miss a beat, and nobody else would hear it. And that's why I think he and Eddie had a lot in common, and they worked together a lot down in Louisiana, because they just had a tremendous natural talent. You couldn't imagine either one of them being in any other line of work. It would have been funny to imagine Murdoch being in some other lines of work, but I don't think they would have worked out. Probably been entertaining to watch, but they were both naturals for this business. And I like to think that I am, and I like to think that I know Harley is, I know Buddy is, and I know Cowboy Bill Watts is, and I like to think that's why that you know, sometimes cream does rise to the top along with some of the pond scum. But anyway, I just want to say that I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be with these guys up here, and I'm glad that we're remembering Eddie and Dick, because they did have a lot in common. And I thank everybody for coming.
For him.
I don't think I'm going to get any closer to
Buddy,
what you guys are. Come on, brother.
The black ceremony.
There's no kind.
Let Buddy read it. You're supposed to present it to him. This is from the National Wrestling Alliance. You want to read it, Buddy?
Yeah. Bill, it's my honor and my privilege to be standing here next to two of the greatest people that's ever been involved in my life. It says, the NWA presented to Cowboy Bill Watts for his dedication and contributions to the sport of pro wrestling and his unprecedented record of never kissing anyone's ass. April the 12th, 1997, Cherry Hill, New Jersey.
Go to plaque. Jimmy, look this way.
Well, coming from these two guys, that's something. You never know what you're going to get. You just know you're going to get something. And, of course, Buddy Landel was one of those stars that I got to touch his life. And I was just talking to Tommy. It seemed like the harder I was on Buddy, the greater he would perform. And any time I treated him like a human being, he'd screw up. So as hard as it was for me to do, I stayed on him pretty good. I mean, it's just not my nature to really be that bad. I just had to sometimes do that to get the best out of those that are around me. But man, he's great, and it's so. I just told him it was so great to get to see him again too. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
I gotta say one more thing. If anybody doubts the promotional genius of Cowboy Bill Watts, anybody else in this room or anywhere that can figure out how to draw $1.2 million in 14 dates at the gate by throwing somebody's face in the cake, let me know, because we need you up in New York.
They cut out the most important part of the angle when I slapped you. That was what you were wondering how to sell it.
Okay, also during the convention, we'll be in there. If you give a donation of $1 per ticket, you have a chance of winning one of Eddie's wrestling tuxedos or a framed 8x10. The money's going to go to the scholarship fund for graduating senior at Lexington High School. At this time, I'd like to bring up, let's show a little video real quick.
Who you talking about? Harley Race's video. Oh, fast forward.
Heavyweight champion of the world, Harley Race. Ladies and gentlemen, special presentation before Harley says a few words from the current National Wrestling Alliance heavyweight champion. Let's welcome Dan Severn.
Conference room 1.
I'd like to take just a moment here. Actually, today was the first time I will be meeting Harley Race. But like a few of the others I've met here today for the first time, I've known a great deal about Harley just from hearing the various stories from different individuals who have been involved in the industry for a long time. And to know that Harley Race held the NWA belt, and the way that he conducted himself and the way that he carried, adding a great deal of rich history to the NWA, and then for me to come, you know, sometime after him, I carry that belt in the same honor and tradition that he has, and for me to present this plaque in tribute to Harley is indeed a pleasure and an honor for myself today. Thank you, Harley. Basically, the plaque says, NWA presented to Harley Race by the National Wrestling Alliance for its great contribution to the sport of professional wrestling. Eddie Gilbert Tribute Day, April 12, 1997, Cherry Hill, New Jersey.
You know, I've always had the position, I guess, in the last few years of following everybody. And over the years, I've been able to do that. I could do it in the ring quite easily. And you bring up a spokesman like Bill Watts. Bill Watts could sell ice cream to Eskimos. He's a master at conversation, and he was a master in the ring. The Gilbert family, I want to thank you for the honor of being here. And Jimmy Cornette, he's the master of the microphone and has been for many, many years. Jimmy can tell you 150 ways how to not do anything at all and get by with it. Right on down the line, Buddy Landel. Buddy, I've known for a lot of years, and he is as flamboyant a person as you've ever wanted to be around in your life. Again, he could sell a watch to a guy that had 20. And as you can tell, I'm not a spokesman. Never have been, never wanted to be. I did what I did in the ring, and I thought I did it fairly well. And again, I'd like to pay tribute to the family and get out there because I can't talk.
Again, I'd like to say that without the help of 97 in regard to Eddie Gilbert Memorial Banquet on April 12th. About Eddie, he came by his exceptional wrestling talent, honestly. His father, Tommy, was the best performer the South has ever produced. I was in Eddie's company only a couple of times, but recognized his handle on this thing we call wrestling. He rose to the top like cream does with milk. Wrestling is poor, and losing this fine young athlete. The Gilbert family is just proud of Eddie's track record. I'm sorry about Mrs. Memorial, but I have prior commitments. A warm hello to all, Lou Fez. Okay, let's get another video in here. Mother's here, Ms. Mosier, and Mike Mosier. If you come up here, I'll have Chief Thunder Mountain's manager for many years, Larry Zeminski here, alias Doc Diamond, present the award. This is for one of the best independent wrestlers I can ever remember. He's a great guy, and I support independent wrestling 100%. And I'll let Doc walk around there, and I'll hand the microphone over to you, and you can present this plaque. I had this picture, it was real special, and I wanted to put it on the plaque, so I'll have Doc go out front there and present it. I'll hand the microphone over.
Mrs. Mosier, I'd like to present this. Miss Mosier, I'd like to present you with this plaque of Chief Thunder Mountain. Okay. He was a big man and he a big heart to go along with it. I know Dave many years. I managed him, but most of all, he was my friend. And I grew up with him, and it says NWA in memory of Chief Thunder Mountain, David Mosier, presented to his family and friends this day, April 12th, 1997, Eddie Gilbert Tribute Day, Cherry Hill, New Jersey.
Thank you very much.
God bless you, thank you. And Bill Watts fined him for hitting Butch Reed. Oh, is that true, buddy? Anyway, I want to talk about, there's someone here tonight I have a surprise plaque for. I want to get a couple young guys up here that work for me and a couple independent stars. We get Ace and Danny Drumondo. Get Cheetah Master, Lance Diamond up here, a couple young stars. I'd like to introduce Reckless Youth, Tom Carter, if he can come up. I want to, like I told you, I have a love for independent wrestling, and it's the lifeblood of the business. A lot of majors, all your major stars, 90% of them have come from an independent promotion. Where's Danny at? He up here? He's probably getting a beer. He's at the bar? All right, well, send him in. Is Ray out there? Oh, no, Ray. Anyway, these guys step on the side here. And I want to talk about someone, a promoter, who carved a little niche in a certain area of the United States here, has promoted wrestling for, God, I can't even count the number of years. 30 years, at least. Trained his own wrestlers. Probably the most honest guy in the wrestling business I ever met. His guys are so loyal to him that they could have went on to work at different promotions, but they didn't. They just wanted to stay with that big fish in that little pond. Danny Drumondo, come up here. And this is the Inferno Kid. Anyway, this guy has such a reputation in the business that the only people that go into his territory have been the WWF and WCW. And once or twice someone has strayed in there and he just sat back and let them do what they had to do, and he didn't like blow their car up or stalk their family and threaten them, stuff that I do, you know. But anyway, I have a plaque here let one of these young guys here present it to the old promoter. Read it. Let you read that there. Here you go. You're hooked on phonics, of course.
I'd like to present this to Jim Kettner for his lifetime accomplishments and contributions, help me with that, Lance, to independent professional wrestling. Thank you. Come on up, Jim. Congratulations, Jim.
Geez, I'm kind of overwhelmed at this. I really never expected anything like this. First, I'd like to thank Dennis, who is a damn good friend. And unlike him, I don't blow up cars or anything. Look at the size of me. I can't do much of anything. But I love wrestling. I started out with 2 pieces of rug in a backyard, as many people in this room have done. And I went all the way to the WWF. I'm doing some part-time work for them at the present time. But my first love is my independent wrestling show, the East Coast Wrestling Association in Delaware. And I have assembled up here what I think is some of the best talent and the future of our business. And it's my pleasure to present them each and every month. There are many of you out there that would like to be on our shows, and eventually, hopefully, we can get you on the show. Again, thank you. I love wrestling, and everyone in this room does, and thank you, Dennis.
These 5 guys up here, I want to tell you from the bottom of my heart, they are the top independent stars in the United States right now. And all of them work for me and Jim. And tonight, there are going to be some good matches with these guys involved, and I'm proud of them, and Jim's proud of them. Thank you. This time, I'd like to introduce you a few words. The great Buddy Landel.
Bill, I got no video and I'm last. Okay. Bill, just to clear your memory up a little bit, I was in the latter part of '83, I was in Memphis with Cornette. Actually, what happened was, Jarrett's not the brightest guy in the world, so he invites Bill Watts up. Bill Watts goes up, Jarrett says, well, just pick who you want. So he raped the joint. He took all of us. Actually, that's the way it happened, right, Jimmy? Little co-sign it for me. You know, I thought I was going to do real well at this until I saw the film on Eddie. And so just, you know, if I get choked up a little bit, just stick with me, because a lot of people don't know this, but Eddie and I don't even know if Mrs. Gilbert, and I know I told Tommy the other night, but Eddie and I were born a couple of hours apart, the same day in the same year. And ironically, we lived a lot of the same lifestyle. We lived it fast and as hard as we could. We didn't miss anything. And we never really regretted anything either. Eddie, to me, well, first off, nobody would ever book me and Eddie in the same territory. Only one at a time. I think that was the rule, right, Bill? I loved Eddie, and I had so much respect for Eddie. And I was talking to someone last night that was a second-generation wrestler. And there was a lot of pressure, you know, especially when you've got a father like Tommy Gilbert that was a wrestling superstar for years, and then having to come up in that shadow. And it was, you know, Eddie loved the business, and he adapted, you know, his self in his own ways. And he was one of the greatest talents that I'd ever had the pleasure of knowing. The last time that I saw Eddie, I wasn't here last year. I just had knee surgery, so I won't be repeating anything. This is the first time that I've actually been able, in the presence of the Gilberts, to say this. And, I'd messed my life up pretty bad. I'd had every opportunity in the world to make money. And so I got out of wrestling for a while and got into church and straightened my life up. And I believe you have to lead by example. You don't have to be a Bible thumper, and you don't have to go out and beat people. Just walk the walk, and people will notice the difference. And I remember Jimmy Cornette, and I just want to say before I tell this story about Eddie, that Bill, I love you. I mean, you have no idea, what you meant to my life, what you brought to me, and what you taught me. And Jimmy Cornette's been one of the best friends that I could ever have. He gave me an opportunity when nobody else would. Nobody believed in me anymore. And Eddie came in to Smoky Mountain, and him and I were sitting off to the side, and I said, Eddie, a lot of people are counting us out, but it's not over till we say it's over. And I said, I'm really praying for you. And with a tear in his eye, he hugged me, told me he loved me, and thanked me for praying for him. And he said, we're going to make it, buddy. We're going to make it. I said, yeah, we're going to make it, Eddie. And I never shared the Lord with Eddie. I should have that day. And I never did. And when he passed away, I frantically tried to get a hold of Doug, and I just wanted to know that he had accepted the Lord. I just wanted to know that he was a Christian. I just wanted to know that I was going to see him again one day. And it bothered me really bad that I didn't. You never know when the last time you're going to see somebody. And so I try to tell people I love them. It might be the last time you ever see him. So Doug Gilbert finally called me after 3 or 4 weeks, and I said, Doug, I got to ask you one question. Was Eddie a Christian? And he said, yeah. And he said, yes. And a weight was lifted off of me. And I just want to say that although Eddie's not here right now, he might not be wearing crepe soles, walking on canvas, but his feet are shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace, and he's walking on the streets of gold with the Lord. And I'm really looking forward to seeing Eddie again, and I will. And it's really an honor and a privilege to be here, to the Gilbert family, to see Bill once again. Tell Jimmy how I feel about him. Dennis has been a great friend. Ric Flair told me one time, we were talking about who the toughest guy in wrestling was, and he said by far Harley Race was the toughest man that had ever been in professional wrestling. He was a 7-time champion back when you didn't have to be the booker to get the belt. And it's an honor and a privilege, and I'm a little bit of a mark sitting up here next to a man such as Harley Race today. But I'm sorry for getting emotional. I loved Eddie a lot. And what you see is what you got with Eddie. He was tremendous. The stuff that he did, the genius, the things that he could come up with were just mind-boggling. And just a pleasure to know him for the time that I did.
Thank you, buddy Landel. Let's have a big round of applause for Buddy.
All right, now we'd like to take the time to let the people here that we're honoring Eddie. We'd like to have his family come up and say a few words. Tommy Gilbert.
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't really know what I can say. You've had some of the greatest right here talking already today. But there's one thing that I will say that Bill was talking about a while ago, about the way things have been. You know, you go back and you start from Lou Thez. You talk in the NWA, and this man right here, thank God that he's trying to keep things rolling with the NWA. But you start with Lou Thez, and you come on through, and you talk about Bruno Sammartino, Bill Watts, and then you can go from Harley to the Funks to the Briscoes. It doesn't matter. Gene Kaniski, the lumbering Canadian man, whenever that man walked through the door of the dressing room and started to the ring, you knew that there was something about that man, but he didn't really look like a wrestler would look. But the way he went to that ring, you knew that man was in there for business and he was going to stop the hell out of somebody before the night was over with. But them men, they had an aura about them whenever they walked through the dressing room door. And that's what makes me so proud, Harley and Bill, that I have been associated with all of you guys. And friendship from out of that crew, and that's what I call them, a crew, you couldn't beat it. Because the guys, Dickie, would call you at 3 o'clock in the morning. Man. What are you doing? Dickie, I'm trying to sleep. Let me go to sleep. And he'd be in, you know, no telling where, but he decided he'd want to call you. And Bill will tell you that, because I imagine he's woke Bill up a few times that time in the morning, and probably Harley too. But Dickie didn't care. He, you know, he liked you, he'd call you. But I can't really go any further than these guys here. I just wanted to mention that them guys, and I mean, I'm leaving a lot of them out. You know, you, Buddy Rogers, you could just keep going with names, just on and on. Whenever they walked through the door, you knew they were championship material, and there was something about them. And as I said, I'm glad to have been associated with so many of them and got acquainted with some. A lot of them that I read about just like everybody else did. And in a way, I'm still a mark just like everybody else because I love these guys. Always have. Dennis, thank you, man. You're a gentleman and scholar. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom. Let's have a big round of applause for Tommy Gilbert and his family. While everybody is finishing up their dessert, we're going to show some more video. Brian Last deserves a big round of applause for his